Welcome back to another episode of Full-Time Hustler, the podcast where we dive deep into the minds of entrepreneurs, innovators, and hustlers who are redefining success. I'm your host, Jason Feemster, and today we have a guest whose extensive experience and leadership in the tech industry will inspire and inform everyone listening. Joining us today is Mark Sloan, an accomplished professional who currently serves as the managing director at Asaph Advisors. Asaph Advisors is a consultancy that specializes in helping professional services clients, whether SaaS or Premier-based software, take their businesses to the next level. Mark leads both market growth and consulting delivery, overseeing a range of services that include business planning and execution, operations optimization, and interim management. Under Mark's leadership, Asaph Advisors has delivered significant value to its clients. The firm's consultants have helped businesses secure multi-million-dollar investments through effective business plan development, implemented operational improvements that have resulted in substantial bottom-line benefits, and led a private equity-backed company's professional services organization to drive both go-to-market strategies and back-office results. With over 20 years of experience in the tech industry, Mark's journey has taken him through a variety of leadership roles where he's consistently driven innovation and growth. Today, we'll explore how he's managed to navigate the complexities of the tech world, what it takes to lead at the highest level, and where he sees the industry heading. So without further ado, Mark, welcome to the show. Let's kick things off with a little icebreaker. What's something interesting about you that isn't on your LinkedIn profile?
Yeah, good to be here. Thanks for having me, Jason. So not on my LinkedIn profile. About a year and a half ago, I left the Washington, D.C. area after nearly 25 years of living there. In the dense area there, you can reach out your window and touch your neighbor's house. And I've moved to central New York where I can't see a neighbor and sit atop 2.5 acres.
Wow. I'm in the D.C. area myself. You hit that dead on the head. If you could have dinner with any three people, dead or alive, who would they be and why?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first would be my grandfather. He passed away about 15, 16 years ago. I got to know him as a young adult, but sort of looking back now, I'd love to pick his brain more, right? Just sort of he grew up during the Depression, had 8 kids. Lived a pretty good life. Very different from what somebody might define as a very good life today. But I think it'd be interesting to just pick his brain and speak to him more as an adult with a lot more experience than I have today than I did when he passed away.
As a person that was raised by my grandparents, I appreciate that answer. Not that that necessarily is important, but again, raised by my grandparents, I appreciate that. I'm sure grandfather would too. What was the first job you've ever had, and what did you learn from it?
So the first job I had was working for my father. He had an office cleaning business, and as a young kid, I got thrown into cleaning offices, and I learned a lot about humility and cleaning up after other people, and cleaned some pretty dirty jobs. Right, I had the dirty jobs before that guy had the TV show, and I can remember calling my dad one day when something really disgusting had happened in one of the bathrooms, and I told him what happened, and it was just silence on the other end of the phone. And I knew what that meant. That was my job to get cleaned up, and there's nothing he could or was going to do about it. So, but it taught me, hey, look, there are going to be dirty jobs out there. Do it, get it done. It'll be over, and move on to the next thing.
Kind of not to be cliche here, but the Nike, the just do it. It's the verb.
Yeah.
The neat thing about a verb, unlike nouns, adjectives, adverbs, everything else, is a verb doesn't need to be described, talked about. I mean, if we see Usain Bolt running down the street, whether you say running or not, it's running.
Right.
They just do it. It's to get that job, in this case, get to the end goal, which is get it done.
Yep.
I want to back up a second. I didn't mean to cut you off. I know I asked for 3 people that you would like to have dinner with, and you mentioned grandfather, and you got me all in my feels because again, being raised by grandparents. But who are the other 2?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. One of my favorite baseball players of all time was Cal Ripken. I think he's another just do it guy, right? With his Iron Man streak of games played. I would love to talk to him just about how he did do it, right? How did he play through pain and injuries, and why was it so important for him to play every single inning of every single game through that time, right? And just, really
explain to me someone that kind of came right after Cal Ripken. I know enough to know of him, but tell me really the resonance, because you're really hitting on some good points that really make him distinct as a player that even I can appreciate now in real time, because I mean, we still don't see that. Like, just in any sport, to say that you're going to play every game is quite the feat.
Right. Yeah. So Cal Ripken was a legendary shortstop and third baseman for the Baltimore Orioles. I grew up in Rochester, New York, where their AAA baseball team was, and got to see him play before he made it to the majors. And he grew up in a baseball family. His father was a coach in the Orioles organization.
That's kind of key. So you saw him even before the majors. So you were there, like, and it's one thing to see like Tom Brady at the top of the mountain, but it's another thing to know who Tom Brady was at Michigan and follow that. So you have to follow Cal Ripken. I have a particular question. Did you follow your fandom even when you were in DC, even though as a Baltimore Oriole player?
Yeah, I am a lifelong Baltimore Orioles fan because of that.
Did you keep that quiet in DC, or did they not hold it against you?
They DC is transient enough that people like teams from everywhere. So my kids got into the Nationals, but I still would drive up to Camden Yards to go see a game and enjoy the field there.
Yeah. Speaking of, don't mind my pipe. I'm unprofessional in the background here with my honey pot pipe. It's because I'm a beekeeper, so it's supposed to be a honey pot, but obviously it's been too much smoke's been through it now. It's turned a little black. But so I love that. What about your third person?
Third person, that's a great question. I'm a huge fan of Winston Churchill, and I'd love to just sit in a room and hear him talk. Right. I've read all the books about him, the autobiography, the biographies, just, books where he just appears in, and, just how he rode a roller coaster throughout his life. Right. I mean, he'd have huge successes followed by, deep canyons of failure and despair, but he never gave up. Right. He kept going through it. And,
and talk about a key time a point in time in history to have the position he had. I mean, he had to. It's not many people that could fill that role at that particular time. And I've actually listened to his speech. I mean, they turned it into motivational videos. The one where he's talking about the British bomb and the British pilots, and he's tipping his cap. And I mean, it's a profound speech in and of itself, even though he's had many.
Right.
I just can't imagine being him at that current time. It's like all the things that you probably read about and probably led up to the time that he's leading the country in a heck of a period. Right.
And even after that, then, he hit another valley of despair, right? Where he wasn't on top of the mountain. He wasn't the man anymore, but he kept going, right? He persevered and came back and did other great things, right? And I think there's huge lessons for everyone in their career, right? I mean, very early on in my career, I had, some big successes and big responsibilities. And I stepped away from that to go be an individual contributor, right? And there'd be days I'd look back and say, why am I doing all this work, right? I had a team that was doing this stuff before.
Right.
And I just look, it's all a learning and growth experience, and it just gives you another perspective on the work to be done.
There's a book that I'm reading now by David Brooks. It's called The Second Mountain, and it's talking about those, the valley. It's like, you'll reach, and I don't give too cliff notes. I'll just give the high level. It's like, what you think is success, and that's synonymous in this analogy with like the first mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Then you'll hit this valley, because these aren't the success, because it's kind of individualization driven in that, these first mountains, like, I got to get the career goal, or I got to get the promotion, or it's the me. Whereas he talks about this second goal, it's more community, and these ultra, again, the story is really about a moral conduct in life kind of guide. But it's talking about the people that can go in those valleys in between the mountains. Now, to the story of the Arthur credits, that you can have multiple peaks and valleys.
Mm-hmm.
Really, those, as you're describing Winston Churchill, that can, look, I was here and then now here, but it's like I can still, I'm not stopped in the valley, nor do I think that this peak is the end.
Right. Right. Well, and because, getting to the peak at times is also situational, right? I mean,
very good point. Very good point.
Right person, but you were in the right place at the right time, right?
Correct.
And if not for fate or fortune, somebody else would have been there, and they may have gotten to that same peak as well, right? I mean, there are very few individuals that are so unique that they're the only ones that can get there, and there are some, right? But I think it's helpful to hit those valleys again, right? To enhance your humility and recognize that it's not just about you, right? I mean, I got to one of my peaks because I had a bunch of great people that were working with and around me, right? And it just, as a side note here, when I was at Anderson Consulting, there was this term that got bandied about stewardship. And, I was a 25, 26-year-old kid, and, I didn't understand what stewardship was, right? But it was this thing you were supposed to live up to, and you sort of got evaluated on it. And it's only now really that I appreciate what they were trying to foster, right? And it was that whole thing of, look, you're going to get to the peak, but your goal is not to stand there and keep other people away, right? Your goal is to bring other people up so that you can go down into the valley and find the next peak, right? And to me, that's
the job of a leader is to make more leaders. You've captured that very well. Wow, you gave the how to it. It's a reach, not just stand there at the peak. I love how you said that.
Thanks.
Now, I want to get to know you, Mark. So
sure.
Let's get a little personal. Can you tell us a bit about you? You started to, and I think this is a great segue again to get to know you. Can you tell us a bit about your journey and how did you get to where you are today in your career? You've alluded to having great people along the way, and I think that's a great testament. So fill us in on what is Mark's journey to this, where he sits right now, where we see him in present.
Sure. Well, the journey was supposed to be second base for the Yankees. But that was the goal at 8 years old. By 13 years old,
nothing wrong with that goal.
Was pretty much dashed. I sort of joke that I'm the accidental consultant, right, in my industry. But it's really not accidental, right? I went to Accenture out of school because it was a great job. I knew I would learn a lot, and I did it for nearly a dozen years. And I would have kept going, but I had a young family, and I was on the road for 5 days a week, and I had about 3 months where I was late getting home, anywhere from 2 hours to 2 days. And just wasn't the life I wanted to lead. So I left for a job that said, come manage a team of 8, right? And again, that's not second base for the Yankees, right? A team of 8's interesting, but it's not the peak. But I thought, hey, this will be a good job. It'll apply my skills. I can get home at night and tuck the kids to bed. As I got to the company, they launched a new software product, and they said, oh, we want you to lead that professional services implementation team as well. And I just, I said, okay, not knowing what that really meant. Long story short, there was huge demand for the software product. There was huge push for it by the sales team because they saw the shorter sales cycle than they were used to. They saw fat commission checks. And so there was a lot of work to be done. We grew it to 1,600 people, $400 million in 5 years. And as a result of that, right, as a result of that growth, I learned a ton, right? And by necessity, we had to improvise, we had to build new processes to enable us to scale. But, that's what necessity is the mother of invention, right? And, lo and behold, I think I really innovated on a forecasting process for resources that enabled us to scale so quickly. I saw that, and with a couple of the folks that I worked with, we started a consulting firm around that, right? And took that into other organizations. And, that's what's led me for the last 15, 16 years to be what I jokingly call the consultant's consultant, right? Helping other professional services organizations, pure consulting firms, get better at what they do. As I look back at my, Big Six Accenture days, there were two types of leaders in the company. There were the client partners and there were managing partners, right? The client partners they're the folks that they know how to build the relationships, they know how to generate work, and they run a client or a couple group of clients. And then there's the managing partners who are back in the office really running the firm. And what I found was most folks that grow up in consulting, they really focus on the consulting partner path, right? Because that's what they see. And there's not as much managing partner emphasis. And as I got into building this professional services group, I for myself and for this company, I saw that there's a huge opportunity to go help other PS leaders really build their managing partner skills, if you will.
That's key. I work a lot with B2B SaaS type entrepreneurial ventures, and I can, first off, two things here. The forecasting piece is still the one that will that I can see cuts the weed. I mean, it's where it cuts the teeth. A good SaaS or a good B2B product generally, and this is a broad statement, but loosely applied, is the ability of forecast. Again, they're coming to me in a financing realm. So again, I'm seeing it through a particular lens. I think the ones that can forecast accurately, and that's a loaded word. Listeners, you need to hear what I'm accurately and subjective to their case, are the ones that make it versus necessarily the ones that do not. Because when and I'm going to keep this high level and short, and just confirmation that what I think you've discovered is a real discovery, because I think I've discovered it myself without necessarily creating the consultancy, is if you can't forecast correctly, that's problem number one. Because running out of money at month 6 when you're supposed to go 9 months, that's a existential problem. What are you gonna do for those 3 months? That gap. It's like and I'd really like that you're distinguishing between the type of necessarily role, even as I see it. You're right. I don't necessarily see even now services that cater to, say, and I like the way you're saying, the managing partner role, even of, say, a SaaS that's scaling. They're in the individual niches, the silo consulting, which are helping the partner type consultant roles. Yet I don't necessarily see the founder themselves having this general person that can jump in, dive into the silos / from their perspective, managing role, managing other consultant partners / their own role. It's like, that is a unique position. I like that you distinguish between the two, and I think I've validated just the product the solution that you've created, plus the audience that you're going after. I see it in my own life, in my own audience.
Well, because a lot of times these software companies, they'll promote, I'll call it the best implementer to be the leader of the implementation group, and what makes you the best shortstop for the Orioles doesn't make you the best manager for the Orioles, right? Like,
very true. I love that analogy too. Stick it to well played. Well, I like the analogy.
Michael Jordan was not a great coach, right? He's arguably the best player that's ever played.
I'm from North Carolina, so you already know that I'm jaded, and I will agree with that sentence, and there is no other option.
There you go. So it is really about, building those skills and capabilities, and you can grow into it, but you either have to have seen it done, you've had to done it somewhere, or you need a coach and a guide to help you, elevate your
I would actually argue everyone needs the coach in the stance that everything we learn, and you could essentially, I'm going to say this backwards, you can thank a teacher. And I mean teacher in the role of consulting. I don't necessarily mean K through 12. I mean teacher, and I want to define that role. And we can say consultant, the way we're using consultant, and the way I'm using the word teacher are synonymous. And as far as because that's how the only evidence of humans learning is monkey see, monkey do. If you've learned something, someone told you how to do it.
Right.
Period. And it's like you could thank a teacher. Now, there's another side to this quote that I don't know if I coined it or if I stole it from someone. I don't know. I don't know who to reference it to, because it's such a broad statement. I doubt that I coined it. But look in the mirror if you failed. But if you succeed, the front part of that, the congratulatory part, is if you succeed, thank a teacher. And I'm saying that to define or to add resonance that I think everyone needs a consultant, and pretty much broadly speaking, because you need to learn, and you can define consultant to their role and what value they need. But it's like, I believe everyone could use, I know that I'm going to use another broad word that is a little bit too broad nowadays, but coach, consultant, teacher, I'm going to use those 3 words as synonymous. You can choose either one.
Sure.
If you need to learn it from someone.
Right. No, I still have people from throughout my career that, I may not talk to for 2 or 3 years, but I'll pick up the phone when I've got a question to call and say, hey, I've got a situation either I've never seen, or, the old way that I would have dealt with it doesn't seem like it's going to work. Give me some advice. Right. And, and again, I think some of that has come with, with age comes wisdom, recognizing what I don't know and recognizing that,
You also said something, earlier that you grew a team, like even within one of your positions, particular to one of your positions. And I think it was implied in all of them, is that you've grown, you've had a lot of your success has contributed to having great people around you. And I will pinpoint and say now this, I mean, in the weeds, the difference between the startups that succeed and the startups that don't. It doesn't, and now there's many variables here. There's demand, there's solving the actual problem, there's many variables, but the number one variable is surround yourself with great people. If you find the startup founder and say they're coming to me in the lane of getting financing, and and you ask them, start defining whatever problem they're solving, let's just say curing cancer, and you start asking them of the business model, and you hear me in it, or I from their point of view.
Yep.
That's already that's a red flag that the investors that I've worked with in 14 years and on debt and equity side will not overcome. See, what makes Steve Jobs, Steve Jobs? In fact, we like to romanticize him, but I like to break him down and point out Steve Jobs was not an engineer. He was a designer. What he was a project manager that was just ahead of his time. He had in fact, if you want to go real, how far do you want to hold this coin or how far do you want to nail down is, Steve Jobs didn't invent anything. He had the great people around him that invented everything. And he was a great marketer, get up at a show and talk about it. It's like he was this amazing project manager that I don't think he ever gets credit for in that regard. It's always like he founded Apple.
Right.
Steve Jobs didn't found anything. In fact, Steve Jobs didn't invent anything. Steve Jobs was great at getting the right people around him, the unsung heroes of Apple, which now the Fortune 1 company, and it's because of the great people around him. And I love that you've alluded to that, in that get the right people, where it's teachers, and in the role of consulting, go find that right person.
Right.
Now, you necessarily don't have to hire them as W-2, but again, this is where consulting, coaching, teaching is a universal, I want to say, option, because that person exists. And if you are the founder that's out there thinking that it's all you, that's where you're going to fail.
Right.
You could be a genius, but no company is invented in a vacuum. In fact, I've probably teed off a lot of startup founders about getting very Dr. Seuss with them and I'll say that the word company means people, plural.
Sure.
Like there's many different variations of the definition, but company does mean like I'm in the company of others, or we in each other's company. So you could take that to also, in Dr. Seuss extrapolation, say you can't build it by yourself. You need that's why it's called a company.
Well, some of the most successful executives that I've interacted with, when I first meet them, I think, wow, I would love this person to be my neighbor, but I don't understand how are they leading this company, or how are they leading the vision?
Many times.
Because they don't come across, as this take charge, I'm going to make every decision person. And then you go into a meeting with them and you sit around the room and you watch what they're doing, right? They're soaking it up. They're getting other people to talk. They're, processing all that information. They're making some tough decisions when they need to, but they're only weighing in when it's a split decision, right? They're going to let the group, they're going to facilitate it, but they're going to go with, the group's right. They're going to go down that direction with the group, and the group made the decision. The leader didn't make the decision, right? The leader facilitated the decision being made.
I like that. I love that use of the verb facilitated. And in fact, this is an oversimplification, but to your point of something I believe prior to, and again, I come from a background of startups and small businesses, so this is skewed, but still applicable. Great CEOs are just motivational speakers. Now, the word just in there is obviously the oversimplification, but it's the greatest CEOs I've seen, the ones that can go from the founders to leading a team of, I haven't been on the ground with from 0 to 1,600 employees, but it's like at the end of the day, they're painting, what I see CEOs do, the great leaders, is they're painting great pictures, and they're giving their team, they surround themselves with great people, and they're empowering those people in their silos, whether that's accounting, whether that's product management or they're getting the great people in those silos, then empowering them. And at the end of the day, again, what they're actually doing is being the motivational speaker that's painting the picture and showing everyone else where their ownership of that picture is.
Right.
I follow some great CEOs, and what they do most of the day is go to meetings and talk.
Right.
Now, that can split hairs, but and again, that's for those listening, that is an oversimplification, but I'll still stand on this hill.
Yep. No, I mean, they're talking, they're spreading, what they've picked up from other people. They're trying to get other people to buy in. But they're not forcing it down. The good ones aren't forcing it down your throat because they know they need the buy-in, right? And they need to say, hey, here's where we're going, here's what we're doing. And they need to then listen when someone says, well, how about this instead? Or how about this in addition to what you're saying, right? So that when the CEO walks out, right, and she flies back to the headquarters, that person that's left in that facility is driving, right? And they're taking ownership of the change everyone's trying to achieve.
I love that, Mark. I'm right. I'm glad we're having this meeting, and you're definitely preaching to the choir. And I'm glad that you are reaffirming a lot of beliefs I've had, whether they are good or bad, but you're reaffirming them. So again, sticking to getting to know Mark, tell me, this is getting more into the Mark's psychology or the psyche of Mark. Tell me what motivates you to get up and go to work every day.
Yeah, it's I guess a big part of it, right? And I hope this isn't corny. It's my dad, right?
Wow.
Growing up, my dad went to college. He wanted to teach. Teachers don't make a large income, but he loves it, right? And he started his own couple small businesses, right? And these are small businesses. He does tax returns for folks for a number of years. We had a family, office cleaning business, and I saw what hard work was, but I saw the joy of it, right? I mean, he got to do what he wanted, which was teach. He did these other things to supplement, income to give us the lifestyle that he wanted to give us, and I've never seen him complain, right? I complain all the time, right? There could be one cloud in the sky and it's going to rain, right? I mean, it could be pouring rain and he's going to see the sunshine through that one little glint in the clouds. And so, as I approach work, he motivates me, right? Because he's worked a lot harder than I have. And I've been fortunate that, I call it, we were light blue collar growing up, and he pushed me to white collar work, and enabled it to happen, and I don't have to get my fingers as dirty.
What's your father's name?
Gary.
So I'm going to give this to Gary Sloan, but I'm going to say hard work doesn't have to be hard.
Exactly. I like it.
Who has been the biggest influence on your career, and how did they impact you?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this. Obviously, my father, from the story I just told. But I look back, right? I was fortunate to get this job coming out of undergrad with Anderson Consulting, right? And I look back, and I can name 4 or 5 people that I worked with, around, Larry Brewer, Andy Hartfitch, Jan Tonkar, and Kathleen O'Reilly. And that was 20 plus years ago. And I still, there are mannerisms that I've picked up that, what I'm doing was what Larry Brewer would do when we were in a meeting, right? Or, hey, as I'm focused on polishing a spreadsheet and getting the analysis right, it's what I learned from Kathleen O'Reilly, right? And just, all of those folks taught me how to be a better consultant, how to interact with people better to get the job done. I mean, I've told this story to others before, but I was working for Larry Brewer. We're working in a manufacturing facility, and we sat on the plant floor in this cube, right? Because that was the only space they could put us. And I'm doing my work, and I'm working at my desk, and Larry said, "Hey, have you talked to Walt today?" And I said, "No, Larry, I don't have any questions for Walt." About 10 minutes later, he asked me again, "Have you talked to Walt today?" "Larry, I just told you, I don't have any questions for Walt." He asked me the third time. I'm like, "Larry, what are you trying to tell me?" He's like, "Just go talk to Walt. I didn't ask if you had questions, right? Just ask him how his kids' Little League team's going. Ask him, what he's doing this weekend. Build a relationship with him so that when you do have to go to him and you need something from him, he doesn't feel like you're a pain in the rear end consultant coming to him, to bug him. It's your Mark, right? You're his buddy, and he's helping you out." And that was a pretty important lesson early in my career.
I will tee that lesson with a personal anecdote that is a Marine Corps philosophy as far as leadership. And I will stand on this hill that there's not a single institution that teach, and Harvard included, academics that teaches leadership, if there was a curriculum of it, better than the Marine Corps. And the reason I'm teeing it here is the Marine Corps is very big from the, and you learn this primarily secondary and tertiary, and that it's driven in all three narratives that the number one asset in the Marine Corps, and this for a lot of reasons, is the single Marine, the individual Marine, not the F-16s, not the Abrams tanks, not the equipment, not even the rifle, which we're so synonymous with. However, the reason the Marine Corps says this is because Marines were if one Marine goes down, that Marine serving multiple roles. It's not like we could just fill someone in. That's you say the primary. But the secondary is, and I give this example that a leader gave, actually a leader that we may know in the status of late, maybe not in the right context in the way that I did as a Marine, but General Mattis, if a single, and I was serving during his time, so again, I'm only speaking of General Mattis or Mad Dog Mattis as I would know him, not any other connotation or expression. If a Marine is say you're getting ready to go into a life or death situation, and that Marine, a particular Marine, any Marine, say got a letter breaking up, his girlfriend broke up with him that morning. Do you want that Marine to be responsible in the situation where your life or death, their life or death may be at risk? And the answer is obviously no. Mm-hmm. And this is why, to your wisdom that you picked up in a different way, but the exact same wisdom that I was instructed, that you need to know the whole Marine, their story, who they are, and again, who that person is, and and how they would react in certain situations. And I don't necessarily mean right or wrong. I mean, would they be happy or sad? And they said, and you need to know this down to, it's not necessarily about the Marines' capabilities. We will all be trained to a certain standard under certain certain verbs. But it's beyond that. You need to know who that person is behind the skin, so to speak. And the Marine Corps is very big in teaching and instilling in their leadership. And as you move up in leadership positions, it becomes outright the primary goal is to know your whole team. Go talk to them. Say, hey, what are you doing this weekend? Oh, you're a Braves fan, or oh, you're an Orioles fan. These things are the things that will make the cohesive team. That we're in the life or death situation, the pending success of that death situation will be those variables, not the variables that actually the Marine Corps taught directly on how to shoot straight and how to stand up and how to be quiet. It's like those things are great, but what will matter is the secondary and tertiary elements of, you say, the person that, again, are you an Orioles fan? Well, hey, if we have a mission going to Baltimore, maybe that's someone you want to send because they're vested in a way that to the Baltimore community more so than say I would be.
Right.
And yeah, that would matter. So I love that you've learned that. And again, kind of a tip the cap to the Marine Corps philosophy, and that you've learned the exact same method and that or outcome or goal in a different facet. But again, it just shows the validity of this wisdom, and take care of the whole person. They and by take care, sometimes that just means getting to know them, listening. Hey, are you a Orioles fan? Are you are you a Patriots fan? Are you whatever it may be? But get to know that person. And right. I want to oversimplify and say, show that you care beyond just the position that we may be in.
The best managers that I've worked for through my career were the ones who found out, if I was going through some personal or medical or family emergency, and they just said, go home, right? We'll take care of it.
That's the best management. I love that you said that. And that's the best management they could do. And that really had nothing to do with professional other than just being human.
Right.
Human with a little bit of empathy.
Yeah, no, it's be human, right? As you're leading people, be human. Don't be, as my kids would say, don't be a bot, right? Connect and treat them the way you'd want to be treated if this was your brother, father, mother, cousin.
Outside of work, what are some of your hobbies or passions?
Yeah, so I've gotten into bike riding, and when I say bike, it's not the cool motorcycle bike. It's cycling. But about
wait, hold on. Are you the one that I'm trying to run over on the side of the road, and you're trying to veer in the mile? Also, okay.
But at least I used to be. I haven't been as good about riding in the past year because where we moved to is a lot hillier than the flats of Washington, D.C. But buddy of mine turned 50 a number of years ago, and we did the trip from Pittsburgh to D.C. over 5 days, and it was a ton of fun. And then we all hung up our bikes for a couple of years and never rode them again. And I finally dusted it off and got it out, and we've all gotten back into it. We did a bike ride from Buffalo, New York to Albany over 5 days, and we've done a bunch of other trips. And
how do you plan the logistics of these type? Because you're not talking about just riding around the block. You're talking about something that takes actual pre-planning.
So
you can't just take any road.
No. It's a lot of it is trail. So if you go from Pittsburgh to DC, you're on the Greater Allegheny Passage for half of it, and then you're on another trail for the other half.
So there's a trail that does help the logistics tremendously.
Yeah. And then from Buffalo to Albany, you're pretty much along the Erie Canal. So you're safe from cars and roads for the most part. The biggest challenge is figuring out which one of our kids can be the car driver that's moving bags from hotel to hotel each night.
Mm-hmm. Because I always assumed that, and I'm glad you clarified, but I assume that there's logistics in these type trips.
Oh, yeah.
Not like you just get up and just head out wanders,
No, you're planning mileage. You're figuring out what hotel you're going to stay at, and but it's a lot of fun, right? It's camaraderie. It's escaping work for a few days. It's just being out there and clearing your head.
How do you maintain a work-life balance, especially in such the demanding field that you're in, consulting, which there's unlimited demand, especially for the niche that you've carved?
Yeah, so early in my career, having grown up at Anderson Consulting Accenture for about 12 years, I thought you were supposed to work 12 to 14 hours a day. And if you worked any less than that, you were slacking off. And so, again, part of the reason I left was because of that, right? I'm sure it's changed, and I'm sure some of that was just me driving it. So I'm not meaning to bemoan the company itself. But I sort of had to learn how to break away at 5 or 5:30 at night, right? Doesn't mean you don't break out the computer after the kids go to bed at 9:30 or 10 if you got to get some work done. But you've got to schedule time for the things you want to do, right? So I've gotten very good at if there's something I need to do, if I want or need to go for a bike ride, or if I've got to need to go do something with my family, I put it on the calendar and I treat it like a client meeting, right? And you're not going to move a client meeting unless there's an emergency. I'm not going to move a family event unless there's an emergency, right? I mean, there's always a call or somebody wants something and say, well, just ask them if we can do it tomorrow, right? And 9.5 times out of 10, they're like, oh yeah, tomorrow's fine, right? And it took a while for me to learn that after, learning that work was the most important thing all the time, the first part of my career.
Well, don't take too much guilt, I could say, in the early psyche, in the sense that, I assume your dad and who taught him, or, you're coming off the heels of the World War II generation, and their mantra, and I mean, in their time and place, it was the right mantra to have, given them, and they wars and they won it, but they had a general psyche in the society, you could say, of work harder, harder, harder. Whether it was, if you had a problem with church, it was just pray harder. If it was work harder, it was just that mindset was of that era of the. And I assume maybe your dad was under it, or his teachers were under it, because that's what instilled that you got to work 12, 14 hours, period.
Right.
So that's where because it's on the heels of who taught us, and that just harder. And I don't want to knock it because it had its place.
Oh, yeah.
And as we're doing, and as you're describing, it sounds like we've evolved, and that we can add more value to what we're working and still take off.
Well, because I also think what I have found, if I don't have anything planned, I will work to fit the time, right? So if I've got 20 hours to get something done, I'll work 20 hours, right? But if it has to get done in 8 hours, I can probably get the same thing done in 8 hours, right? It's the lessons I learned from procrastination in college.
Elon Musk talks about this, and I don't want to reference him in any other way than business, is that he talks about, and he was the first one I heard this from, what you're mentioning, is that if you give yourself 3 hours, it will take 3 hours. If you give yourself 8, it will take 8.
Right.
And he was making it, and the time I was hearing it, it was like the first time I've heard that it's actually not the task itself. It's the time that the individual assign that task allots.
Right.
But that really puts the key down to allot the time. It doesn't matter what you choose. You could choose 20 minutes, 20 days.
Yep.
But that's the skill, is to actually allot the time, whether it's a cookout for family barbecue or, again, a work thing, but actually allot the time, because that's what you will take.
Right. No, exactly. And in the event you allotted 4 hours and you're not done with the work and it's going to take 6 hours, okay, you'll find another 2 hours, but you can still break away and go to the kids' little league game and then come back at 8 o'clock and get it done, right? Or do it in the morning, or
in that case, burn the midnight oil, because in that case it ended up taking 2 extra hours, and you still go to the game though. You still go to the next, and I love that. Yes, you're right. You will make up the time, surprisingly. What's a personal challenge you face, and how did you overcome it? And be as forthright as you care to be.
Yeah. I go back to this personal challenge, which I think still, plagues me to some degree today. I go back to 4th grade. I had to give a 5-minute interest talk, and stand up in front of the class and talk about whatever topic I wanted to talk about, but it had to be 5 minutes. Well, I did the research. I prepared. I got up there. I was back in my seat in 30 seconds, right? I had this paranoia of public speaking at the time. And, my teacher and my mom made me do it again, right? And they made me prep more, and they, I had to fill in more content. So I had more to talk about. I had to practice more. And then, like 3 days later, I was back up there, and I spoke for 4.5 minutes and 45 seconds, or 4 minutes, 45 seconds. Right. And, I still have that challenge today, right? I do it. I get up, I'm in front of an audience, and I'm comfortable speaking, but, I make sure that I over prepare going into it so that I'm comfortable doing it. Right. And, it's taken practice, and I think I've gotten it, but it's still, all these years later, I still think back to Mrs. Lewis's class and running back to my desk after 30 seconds.
I find that's interesting, and I could almost see how it would sound contradictory, but yet also exact for how you are where you are now, in the sense that tell me about your current consulting roles. Are they more in that one-on-one or in small team environments, compared to contrasting against, like, say, the audience? Like, and I assume audience there is extremely plural, because you say in classroom. That's why I'm taking that assumption. Versus and may I ask if if that does not exist, that fear does not exist. Say if it was just me and another founder, or like you're talking to me now very fluidly.
Yeah. I think it's at times it's both, because I I do the one-on-one or one on a few consulting meetings, and then I actually have a curriculum I teach on how to be a better consultant, right? The soft skills,
and that would be the audience distinction,
right?
Okay?
And that's where it's 25 to 45 people,
right?
And so at times it's both, right? There are times where I go into a 2-person meeting and I'm totally comfortable, but in reality it's because I know the subject matter that we're talking about at this point, right? It's something I've done 50, 60, 70 times, so I've got that confidence level. But to me, it's the lesson I learned was be prepared, right?
That is the truth. That's the underlying thing, and also the kind of what you said that your mother made you redo it. And really what's implied in that is you became more familiar. So you still may have the fear, as you're admitting, and yet what's stronger than that fear is your comfort in that material will determine whether you bomb or succeed in a meeting.
Right.
It has to do with your comfort. Assume now as the consultant, you're comfortable because it's your material.
Yeah, well, and the joke that I learned years ago, right, is it can, what's the difference between a consultant and a client? And it's like, 30 minutes reading the literature before the meeting, right? And you're prepared. And I like to think I'm a little more prepared than that, and that I've done my homework, and so that
praise though
when I do get challenged, or because you'll be sitting in a conference room, and there's always that one person who doesn't want the consultant there, or thinks that the consultant's not going to know enough. Mm-hmm. I think because of that experience I had, right, or at least that's what I reference as I'm preparing for these meetings. It's like, what are the questions I'm going to get asked, right? Who are the stakeholders that are participating, and what's their persona, right? Who's the person that's always going to nod their head and agree with you no matter what you say? Who's the person that's going to ask you, an insightful question just because they want to learn? And who's that person that doesn't want you there? And how are they going to try and cut you off? And just making sure that you're prepared as much as you can, and that hey, if they've got something that is a zinger, hey, I don't know the answer to that. I'll get back to you, right? But not letting it rattle you. And so even if you don't know the answer, if you're prepared enough, you can overcome that fear, I feel like.
That's a great segue into my next section of questions, and they will fall under, you could phrase it or context it as, preface it as professionally oriented. So what are some, and in that context, what are some of the biggest challenges you faced in your career, and how did you navigate them?
Yeah. One of them, so I was thinking about this one was, again, early on in my career, working for Larry Brewer, we had to, design a process improvement for the plant floor. And I had done my research. I had researched like engagements. I had looked at what other people had designed, and I designed something that I knew was going to work, right? And so about 11:30 at night, I had to go into the second shift, and I had to, share with the group, here's what we're going to do different. Here's how it's going to work. And I got about 10 minutes in, and, I was prepared, right? I did my homework. I had all the answers, except that the two plant floor supervisors, there, they didn't want to make the change, right? And they were the ones that shot holes in it, right? And back in my hotel at 12:30 in the morning, thinking, oh man, this is terrible. Well, I went back out to the plant floor the next day, and I said, well, look, this isn't going to work. Help me come up with something that's going to work. And the long story short here is that the solution we ended up implementing was 99% of what I had proposed. They just wanted to be consulted, right? They wanted to participate. They wanted to feel like it was.
Also, you phrased it as a question when you came back. I noticed that when you came back, really what you did is you didn't say yes or no, or it was, okay, so they didn't take it as you sold it initially. I shouldn't say sold, but as you delivered it initially.
Yep.
So you phrased it as, well, what can we do type thing, and let them fill it in. And I guess the psyche, as they say, you were the last thing they heard, and they just kind of re-gave you back your plan.
Right. They said it like this. I was saying it like this. The beauty of it was about 6 months later, after the solution went in, I went back to just do a site visit and see how it's going. These women came up and hugged me. Right.
Wow.
Like, so they went from being the enemy in the room to like, hey, we're all good together. So again,
from the skeptics to the believers.
Yeah. And it again, it's, this was, fortunately, it was early in my career. And so these lessons I've learned are, to consult is to, not just tell, it's a give and take, right? It's to engage, it's to advise, it's to learn as much from your customer as you hope that they learn from you.
This is again, an oversimplification, but it's the art and science, I guess I'm taking from this, and correct me where I'm wrong, of consulting at large. And it doesn't matter what niche one may be in, but it's remembering the human element of that. The end result is the human, and that's not necessarily as universal, say mathematics, 2 + 2 is 4. It's like, it's not that way. It's a, right. It could be 4, but you have to deal with the human part, in this case, probably potentially your client, their element.
Yeah. It's, I mean, I like, part of this consulting skills class I teach, I teach the concept of a stakeholder map, right? Like, figure out who the stakeholders are, figure out what their disposition is, and then, determine your course of action of how you're going to interact with them, right? Again, as I said earlier, right? There's always that person that's a supporter, but you have to figure out, do they have sway with the rest of the group or not? If they do, you want to engage them, right? You want them up there at 12:30 in the morning delivering the training on how it's going to work, because then it's coming from one of their peers, not from this outsider. That person who's the naysayer, you're going to have to go spend time with them. You're going to have to figure out, what don't they like about what you're trying to do, and is it valid? Is there something else that you could do that they would agree with, or or just know, look, they're going to be an obstacle, but hey, this is the right solution. But being prepared and having that in advance, is just going to make everything go smoother.
Wow, the intel of the consulting. It's not necessarily about the subject matter. So beyond just having subject matter expertise in what you're consulting on, but also the intel, therefore, is equally important. And that, and in another vertical, you would say this as know your audience.
Right.
And that's very abstract, but applying it to the consulting role, it's like, you do need to know your audience, because that has to do with how you're delivering this consulting, how it's received, and more importantly, considering the element of who it's to.
Right. Yeah, cookie cutter solutions won't work, right? Or the cookie cutter solution.
Even if it does, I don't think humans, we like it that way just because we know it's cookie cutter. So you still don't have to like personalize it.
Right. And that's the point, right? It's like, look, okay, round off the edges of that cookie cutter because that's what these guys want, right? And sharpen them for these other guys because that's what they want. But again, it's about engaging right now, right? To consult is not to tell, it's to engage, right? It's to get to some agreed destination together.
I see things moving forward at large. At the turn of the century, it was industrious. How can we make the most widgets? And now I see things moving from, like factory to farm to, instead of the massive appeal of the factory, which served its place as, population's booming and then turn of the century. Whereas now it's like we're taking those things, and unless the cookie cutter, and I'll say factory, it's like just keep it pumping. It's like now we're wanting personalization. It's they take that and evolve what has happened, say in 1900, and evolve it to where I don't just need the widget that's right next to me, make it mine. Mm-hmm. And as that relates, it goes right into my next question. How do you see the industry evolving in the next 5 years?
Yeah. So, I think everything, just continues to move faster, right? And my biggest pet peeve within consulting is around pricing, right? And when you start talking to a customer and they say, hey, that sounds interesting, what's that going to cost me? And I've delivered this answer, but I've heard it even more from my clients as I've sort of observed them, out there. The answer that people give is it depends, right? Mm-hmm. And think about having a home contractor come to your house and you need a new roof, and they want to get started with the work, and you ask them, well, what's going to cost? Well, it depends, right? I mean, you're probably not going to have that contractor work on your roof, right? You're going to want to know it's $5,000, it's $10,000, it's $100. Now there might be changes throughout. They might find a bigger, rotted area of plywood under the shingles that they have to replace later. But at least to start, it's X. The big thing to me, and I've been advocating this to my clients for a while. Everyone wants to sell software as a product. I tongue-in-cheekly say we should sell services. Everyone wants to sell software as a service. Everyone should be selling services as a product. And what I mean by that is define the standard service offering, right? It's 1 week, it's 10 weeks, it's 30 weeks of work. Here's the deliverables you're going to get. Here's the price. So when
is this mirroring is what you're mentioning? Because if so, I could have a whole nother conversation on this particular topic. And because I think it's where we're at, and it's very needed, especially my clients. And it's in what they call productization of services.
Yes.
It has to do, first off, the people that preach, and I mean, maybe that term is not as universal as it may seem to me, but they're talking about even services themselves are not scalable because it's usually the consultant themselves. What you want to do is get it down to where you could productize this service. And no, that's not trying to implement the factory, but it's taking the part of the cookie cutter approach of mass scale and making it, again, scalable. And right. It's so many services are actually not productized. Are we speaking the same thing, or am I talking somewhere in left field?
No, we're talking the same thing. So there's in my mind, there's two components of it. There's delivering and there's selling, right? So in order to accomplish selling services as a product, you have to define what you're going to deliver, right? And you want to make that
very finite, that X.
You want to make it repeatable. You want to have your working templates, right? You want to have your deliverable templates. You want to have examples so that when the delivery team parachutes in, you don't have to have all the experts doing it, right? They've got content they can rely on, right? And they can drill into. And I think most services firms are doing a reasonably good job of that, right? Because they've got knowledge repositories. People can go find stuff. And so they can do it, right? But then when you go to sell it, it's still the answer today is, to price is it depends. And so what I'm advocating to folks is take all that packaging, define a standard scope, right? For 80% of the projects we do, here's what they look like, right? It's this many widgets, it's this many interfaces, it's this many customer interviews, it's whatever it is. Here are the deliverables. Put a work plan against that, put a price against it. So when the customer says how much that's going to cost, $45,000. Well, but we don't need this piece. All right.
Now
Well,
you can start. Right. But you have something to work from to add to or take away. You've got the line in the same. You've got the par.
Yeah. And that's a much more engaging, interactive discussion.
I think objective from consumer and supplier and consultant, because again, you do need a common ground to speak from, even if it's as contentious as pricing.
Right. And again, it takes away that fear of, oh, it depends, right? Oh, is this going to be a $300,000 project? No, look, the base price is $45,000. Here's what you get. Well, we don't need that. We want this. Okay. And I sort of describe it as Lego blocks, right? Build your Lego blocks of what your service offering components are, snap them together, and you got a price. Take one off, the price goes down. Add another Lego block, the price goes up.
What's a project you're particularly proud of, and what made it special?
Yeah. So one of my, as I went to this company 20 years ago and managed a team of 8, and I grew it to 1,600. I had to build a process for us to forecast resource needs, right? And essentially translate the sales pipeline to a resource pipeline, so we could take a look at, do we need 500 people? Do we need 50 people? Do we need 10 people? We built that process and we executed it for ourselves, right? And we grew and grew very profitably, and it was great, right? But then as I transitioned into consulting about all this, went into another company and was advising them on that type of process, and as we've talked about, tailoring it for their needs and the way they work. We implemented it. We even put some people in there to execute it for them for a period of time, and then we stepped away, right? Because they had it going. And about a year and a half, 2 years later, I was checking back in with the customer and said, hey, how did it go, right? Just want to hear about it. And he's like, well, we drove $100 million of profit, and we were in the process of selling the company, and they since sold it to a large global systems integrator. I'm like, wow, I kind of wish you would have called me to just tell me that, because that's pretty exciting news. But it's fun when you've got an idea, you help them do it, you leave, they keep running with it, and and achieve some pretty great things.
This next section of questions, I want to phrase them under, say, leadership and strategy. What's your leadership philosophy, and how do you inspire your team?
Yeah, so I will see people that sort of worked with or around me 10, 15 years ago, and they will throw this phrase back at me, and it's make it happen, right? And I'll come back to my father again, right? When I was working for him as a young kid, right, I'd come to him and say, hey, what do you think? Am I done? And every single time, right, he would reply, well, what do you think? Right? And he was teaching me to figure out what done and success looks like, right? He didn't want me to just go to somebody else for validation that the job was done, right? So I had to think about it, right? I had to learn, and I had to decide, is this good enough? Can I do better? Should I do better? And so as I started managing people, sometimes there's not a lot to do. Sometimes there's a lot to do. I didn't want to be a micromanager. And so they'd come to me with, well, hey, I think we should do this. And my knee-jerk reaction was, make it happen, right? If you think we should do it, it's probably a pretty good thing to do. Go do it, right? If you need help and you're struggling with making it happen, I'll partner with you, engage, and sit down. But it's amazing what people will do when they're bought into an idea, and when it's their idea and you empower them to make it happen, great things can happen.
How do you approach decision making in high pressure situations?
So with this one, I read a book by Lou Holtz, the legendary Notre Dame football coach, years ago, and he talked about his approach to prioritizing, and he had this simple acronym, WIN. What's important now, right? So I probably read this book 20 years ago. Anytime I'm in a high pressure situation, I'm trying to figure out what to do. I hear Coach Holtz say, what's important now, right? Anything that's not important now, it's a distraction. So set it to the side, right? Focus on what's important now, make a decision, act, course correct if you need to. but then come back to those secondary items later, right? Like sometimes, like there's a lot on your to-do list. You have to figure out what's most important now, get it done, and then move on to the next thing.
I love that in the sense that I believe you've turned the high pressure situation into the strength, because I assume many others you may find difficulty in triaging that question, what is important now and not, but it's the high pressure situation where a lot of that answer could be answered by the nature of the pressure is real in that moment. So what may seem equal wouldn't be equal then. So
Right.
you can answer. So you're like turning the high pressure into the strength, because it will help you triage what is important now.
Yeah, the benefit of pressure is focus, right?
Good point. That's exactly what I'm alluding to. Yes, that's it.
When your house is on fire, it doesn't matter that your electrical bill hasn't paid. You're going to find the water to put the fire out, right? And that focus helps you get it done.
Can you share an example of a time when a strategy you implemented did not go as planned? And what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah. So I was leading a services-enabled technology company. The technology itself was founded by one of the smartest people I've ever met, right? A literal genius. And we were going out and we had to put services around this technology because it wasn't user-friendly enough. The challenge
a lot of services have that fault.
The challenge was the founder had been incubating this for about 10, 12, 13 years. So he knew all about it. He understood the depth of the complexity within it. And he wanted everyone to operate at his level. Like, one, which was impossible because he literally was a genius. Two, because this technology was complex. And, we couldn't get there. But I over-listened to him, right? And so, hey, this is his baby. I'm working for him and the investors, so we've got to do this. The problem was we couldn't get people to put the time in for all that complexity, right? Like in a sales meeting, they would be, wow, that's great, that's interesting. But when the rubber hit the road and they had to put fingers on keyboard, they would get distracted because this wasn't a what's important now thing. It was a nice to have thing. And so the lesson I relearned, right, is keep it simple, right? I tend to follow sort of a crawl, walk, run evolution phase. And again, looking back, I now see how we could have done crawl, walk, run. But I over-listened to the founder. Again, smart guy, he's right. But we got to get people to run after they learn to crawl, after they learn to walk.
These next questions I'd like to phrase under industry insights. What trends are you currently excited about in your industry?
Yeah, so historically, there was sort of account management and there's professional services, right? And now we've got this newer group, right? Been around for 10, 12, 13 years, customer success, right? So the group that's really supposed to drive adoption of the technology that's going to be around for the long haul and make sure you're getting the benefit from the technology that you bought. The professional services team, they're the ones that are coming in, they're implementing it, they're turning it on, and then they're handing it off to you. Right now, historically, customer success has grown up outside of the PS organization. Again, one is ongoing relationship, one sort of the point solution. But as I look back at the big six consulting firms, right, customer success and professional services were really linked together, right? It was one person. It was the account partner or the senior manager leading an engagement with the customer who they wanted to make sure you implemented, but they wanted to make sure you were successful with it. And I believe that over the next 5 to 10 years, software companies, technology companies are going to start to see an integration of customer success and professional services because, you don't want your professional services people just getting in and getting out, right? Turning it on, leaving and moving away. And if you can combine the organizations, I think you can do it more efficiently and effectively for the end customer.
How do you stay ahead of the competition in such a fast-paced environment?
Yeah, this one's tough, right? It's like as I've seen in most industries, right? I mean, part of it's just the grind, right? You get there, you do it, You observe, you're absorbing, the grind is absorbing it through osmosis, right? And figure out what's going on. I do think then you've got to step back and you have to look at what's your competition doing, right? Like, and play a little, copy and paste if you need to what they're doing. Talk to your customers, right? Where are they going, right? What are they thinking, right? And so you combine all those things. Then you got to step back as your own company and decide, right? What lever of competition are you going for, right? Are you going for operational excellence? You're going to be the low priced provider, right? Are you going to be a Walmart, right? And that's one way of working, right? But you've got to then define, we're going to remove all the other distractions. We're going to do these core things. We're going to do them well. We're going to do them at the best price, and we're not going to do the other things. Or are you going to deliver some innovative product or service that people seek you out for, right? And then that takes a different sort of core capability, competence, right? And the people you have, right, that are focused on that. Or are you going to be the innovator? And so, for my work, I'm really focused on excellent service offerings, right? That provide value, right? So, I want to innovate to some degree, but I want to make sure as we deliver, we're going above and beyond, right? And
kind of goes back to the previous question, the customer service, the integration of it. You're implementing it even at like the most intricate level, because it's like it shows that your philosophy is true and universal, and that you're putting it in not necessarily as a silo of customer service. The way you're describing it now, it goes into your differentiation.
Yeah, and you're not
the Walmart. You're not just like cheap price. It's like, we're not the cheapest, but we will be the best all around holistically, and that the experience of the consumer.
Right. And I think that's what I took away from the first 12 years of my career. Right. And it's
nothing against Walmart, by the way. We're not.
No,
Beautiful model.
Right. There are a number of very large firms that are making a ton of profit doing that way. This is how I'm going to stay into the competition. Right. And it's about making sure that you become a trusted advisor for your clients. Right. So I get calls from former clients just with a quick question. Right. It may even be something that's not 100% in my domain, but because I've built up that trust, because I've delivered for them before, they'll seek out my opinion on something. And to me, that's a sign that I mission accomplished.
If anybody from Walmart headquarters is listening, I would say that if you wanted to implement Mark, maybe it would be, this is one of infinite ideas of product design or product development here, but maybe introduce a concierge type shopping and get Mark to help you add that concierge, because again, that's the one. Sure, you'll get the cheapest price, but if you want to find XYZ trying to find a Walmart employee, or much less one that knows what you're talking about to your particular, that's beyond. So it's like, I'm creating this product on the fly, like a concierge service would be beyond Walmart.
There you go.
Like, again, they're just going to get you the cheapest, and I've had startups deal with them. They're actually very hard to get and also supply their demand. It's like a lot of startups would be great, but you can't supply what Walmart will order tomorrow, to the point that they've got their process down. You have to be the cheapest.
Right.
Like,
right.
If that's not you, and that's the majority, I say businesses are not that. Don't try to be the cheapest one. Try to add this other elements, whether it's customer service, whether it's a more value add to the product, not just your, the cookie cutter items that can be cheap, but it's also to those companies. So to Walmart, I say, hey, maybe an idea on your product marketing should be, hey, a concierge type service or something thereof, because it adds to the experience beyond Walmart shopping. Of course, you're going to need Mark to do that. And to everyone else, you're going to need Mark to know how to implement or to help facilitate all these moving parts and actually be a value add above the cookie cutter.
No, I appreciate that. Sounds good.
Hopefully someone's listening. Speaking of, what advice would you give to someone just starting out in this field? So I want to hang my own shingle, and please answer this almost in two parts. Answer it particularly in your vertical, and I'm going to say your vertical, and I'm going to expand that a little bit and say tech consulting at large, so to tech, to enterprise and SaaS companies, particularly that type consulting, and then to just general consultant at large advice. So again, the question being, what advice would you give to someone starting out in this field of consulting? And I hope I pigeon that or split that into two consultings, like particularly tech type, SaaS, versus just if someone wanted to be a consultant at large, what advice for them?
Yeah, I think the advice is probably pretty similar. I mean, the first is, don't assume you know the answer, right? Especially as you're coming in, soak it all up from everyone around you, right? And this is if you're, a 22-year-old getting into consulting right after school. But I saw this with experienced hires at Accenture that would come out of industry and come into Accenture. They sort of thought at times that they knew the answer, and they probably did, but they didn't know the culture, right? And they didn't know how to, deliver within that culture. So soak it up, ask questions, learn from everyone that you interact with at work, and even the ones that you don't like, right? Because as I've reflected on my career, I've probably learned the most from managers that I disliked than the ones I liked, or at least I remember those lessons because it was, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to do it this way. And so, as you then get into consulting, right, there's two ways to operate, right? There's to become a subject matter expert that people rely on.
I think that's what is assumed when you generally assume when you say consultant is some kind of SME of X.
Well, it's interesting because there are consultants that are facilitators, right? So you can hire a consultant who understands sort of the general space, but they may not be the expert on that topic. But they're inquisitive. They'll do the research. They'll network. They'll leverage the knowledge management system that the company has, and they will find and build the creative solution for you, right? And that's where, hey, what's the difference?
We could define that like the creative consultant versus, you could say, the technician.
Right. And so, my advice when you first get into consulting is to get a broad set of experiences, right? Different roles, different technologies. Don't pigeonhole yourself from the start. Now, over time, you'll start to develop, what we used to call a personal brand, right? Because hey, now you're working on these types of projects a lot. People know that you're the subject matter expert for that, but it's also not the only thing that you can do because you've had this breadth of experiences, across that, right? Because the thing I've found is the folks that really develop a deep expertise in one particular thing, at times that knowledge can become commoditized, right? After 3, 5, 6, 7 years, as more and more people do the work, the value of your subject matter expertise decreases, right? So in consulting, you constantly, or continually at least, have to reinvent yourself, right? What is your subject matter expertise? What is your personal brand, your secret sauce that you bring to the table?
I want to give an example and see if this mentions on what you started to answer this by, and see if this hits on it. And it had to do with a startup that had the right answer. And their end client, they were going after an enterprise solution. But where they failed is they failed to realize what, say, and I'm going to give an analogy of a factory. I won't give it was a deep tech type thing, but the analogy is still spot on in that. So they were selling to Microsoft, and Microsoft, so let's say Microsoft has this conveyor belt, and what they were implementing or suggesting, which is arguably correct, but where they failed to get clients is they didn't realize that for Microsoft to implement their product, their solution, that Microsoft would have to re-engineer their whole factory line, versus the person that came in and got this that solved the solution and got this contract. They weren't suggesting anything innovative. Arguably, quite the opposite. They were saying, and I find this to be the difference between younger founders versus seasoned founders that have been in industry and come out and have a startup. I do define this because the second being this, who will get they're not interested in an innovative solution. What they're saying is, hey, change this screw at the end of this factory line, and it will make your belt turn 3 times faster, and you'll make 3 times more widgets. But all you have to do is change this screw.
Right.
You don't have to replace all your machines. You don't have to replace which the first one, again, was a very innovative and arguably, and in hindsight, the accurate answer. They didn't win, to your point, and they didn't consider necessarily that Microsoft can't just close down their factories and they re-implement, build a new factory around their solution.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the approaches I've learned in consulting, right? And probably most consultants have done this. It's the as is definition. What are you doing now? What's the to be definition? And what are the gaps, right? And to your point, you want to get to an optimal to be, but if the gaps are so large, it's going to take you too much time and money to get there, right? That might not be optimal, right? Or you've got to lay out sort of a phased approach that says, look, here's what we want to get to in 5 years. Here's what we can do over the next 3 or 4 quarters. Here's what we'll do the next year and the next year, right? You've got to make it digestible.
I have 2 more sections and I do want to respect your time. If you do have to go, please do, but I love the value that we're providing. So if you bear with me, I do have 2 more sections of questions because again, your content is so universally, I believe, valuable to my audience, and that even if they don't like one piece, they could like another piece in the sense, because again, you would overwork. It's the nature and the value I get when I interview people that are necessarily not in a industry themselves, but can be universal, like me, financing, and you consulting. It's like, well, financing, I can finance a space company, I can finance a bank, I can finance a software company. It's like I'm not tied to one.
Sure.
Necessarily, neither is consulting, though I do have lanes that I work best with and find more funding for those. But for that sake, and the depth and the breadth of your experience, I do have 2 more sections. But again, I respect your time. If you do have to go, please just acknowledge, let me know, and I'll wrap up. But the 2 sections, if I can go into the next one, I would title this under controversial. And I don't necessarily mean to dive into that and to step on anyone's toes or offend anyone, but I do want to get that depth and breadth and resonance from the subject matter expert, and that being you, of this general field of consulting, in a way that I think is applicable to a large audience, a large listener base. So if you'll bear with me, I'll start with, what's a common misconception people have about your industry?
Yeah, and I may have referenced this earlier. The joke about consultants is that they borrow your watch to tell you what time it is. And sometimes
I've heard something of that sort.
Sometimes it's actually true, right? They may tell you what you already
know. That doesn't help.
Well, but sometimes it does, right? Because it's an independent third-party validation.
That's a good point. You're right. Even just the third-party nature of it has value that you can't discount.
So if I'm running an organization, or I'm running a group, and I bring this consultant in, like I've got this theory that I want to do this, but I can't get the organization to make that change, right? Sometimes the consultant comes in and again provides that independent third-party view.
Yes, and that is a value in and of itself that I don't want to discount, and I kind of just did.
No, it's fine, but I think then the extra value that the consultant brings to that is, okay, how do we make the change, right? How do we address that pain point? And because the part of the value of the consultant is you're in so many different environments over the course of a year or multiple years, you're bringing different ideas to that person who may have this gut feel, but doesn't have the insight on how to make the change, or
so
what
the processes, if you will. That can be the where teeth can be cut. It's the process and implementation thereof, not just consulting itself.
Right. No, and I include those changes as part of the consulting effort, right? There's the diagnosis, there's the recommendations, there's the execution, and really, I enjoy doing all 3, right? I love coming in and finding the problems or the opportunities for improvement. But if I don't get to stick around and actually help make the change, it's sort of like, well, okay, I diagnosed your sore throat, but I don't know if you ever got better.
Are there any industry practices you believe should be challenged or changed? Now, we spoke of just misconception. Now, this one is things that you think should be challenged or changed. And I love the misconception because, like I said, even I felt guilty there for a second.
So the thing I've continually been surprised about is that value-based pricing has not become the norm for consulting services, right? And what I mean by that is, look.
Well, this goes back to your pricing. Are you an advocate of the value base? Meaning back to that whole struggle of if pricing, the stress that creates so many people. But if you go on a value-based system, it would simplify it.
Yeah, I think it would. The challenge I've heard from other folks in the industry, and this has popped up from time to time, is sometimes those benefits are so big, the client then balks at paying the predefined share to the consulting firm for the value that was delivered.
So how does the consultant pigeon like segment that then? Is that possible? Can you segment it? Say it was this over large, say $50,000 project. Can you break that down into 10,000, $5,000-$10,000 solutions?
Yeah,
I think that's the skill of the consultant.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it is, okay, like, look, we'll do it all for value-based pricing, but it's uncapped, or we'll do it for 50% of the normal price with a percentage of the benefits up to, this total cap, right? Increasing. But to me, pricing is always about options, right? You want to present the customer with options. So it's not a yes or no answer. It's, oh, yeah, no, I don't like that one, but hey, this one's interesting. Can we tweak that a little bit, right? Instead of 50% of the benefits, you get 45% of the benefits. But
McDonald's would sell a fraction of the fries if they didn't offer it in small, medium, large.
Right. Exactly. So giving people options just gives them more ability to say yes, right?
I want to say control.
Yeah.
The illusion of thereof, at least.
Yeah, exactly. So I think if you can come to it, if you've got your defined set of offerings, you know what the benefits are, you can work through what those different scenarios are, right? And you pilot it with a couple customers, see what's working, what challenges come, and then you just refine it over time. But I fundamentally believe, especially on some of the larger dollar deals for these companies, it would decrease the sales cycle if the two parties were together, right? It's not the client forking over a bunch of money hoping they get this. It's, we're doing this. We both want to achieve these benefits, right? So, I think it makes the consultant more vested in the solution.
Tell me if this is an example of under your as provided and expressed in value-based type pricing. I mean, this involves a consultant coming in to make this change, and it has to do, and it was back to a previous topic. Everything you're saying kind of ties in, by the way. You're very good at storytelling. I don't know if you know that or not, but these questions are unrelated on purpose. That's me. And yet everything has had a flow through the way you're delivering it. And I think that's beautiful. That's a credit to you. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but credit to you. Because again, this is going back to a previous thing. We're talking about pricing, but under this value-based pricing, which we think we should move to, and I'm jaded in saying that I'm an advocate of it because of this example. There was an loosely said an automation service for light accounting, for accounting for, say, but I mean light accounting. What I mean I'll define that as small businesses with less than 500,000 in receipts, or $1 million in receipts. You're 1 million and under in annual receipts. This automation could handle you and replace the bookkeeper and accountant in your files, everything. Okay. Well, this company initially, when launched, was pricing based off you could say their inputs. It costs this to do that, it costs this to do that. And it was marginal. It was completely marginal. It was nominal. I'll say it in that way. It covered their expenses. Plus, you could say like their algorithm, so to speak, is all their expenses to build this automation plus 30%. You could say that was their initial at launch pricing strategy. They brought in this consultant, and I don't necessarily know if they were conscious of preaching what you're saying now or practicing it, but they were following what I'm interpreting as what you're saying, value-based pricing. They said, think about what you're saving the consumer. And the founder quickly answered, well, they don't have to have an accountant. This does everything automatic. It files. It's accurate. It's more accurate than an accountant. And it's also overseen by accountants because that's who built this automation. Someone like accountants teamed up with a machine learning engineer, and boom, got this type tool. So they said, well, how much does an accountant cost your clients? And, let's just, for the sake of large numbers, say it was an average of $100,000 a year that these businesses were having an accountant on hand or someone on staff year round. They said, well, they could repurpose them. So that essentially they could repurpose that employee, something more whether in tune with finance or even in another lane, where that's the company's prerogative. But ultimately you're saving them $100,000 a year. So why don't you charge $25,000 a year? And this founder balked at it. I mean, there was a lot of friction, not beef. There was a lot of friction and a lot of hesitancy on the founder's point. Ultimately, the consultant won, which there's a lot to say in there, and you can probably read it. And it wasn't instant, in that it took 6 months of this consulting relationship and the consultant keeping, and this is key, I think, especially in your field, is the keeping that relationship ongoing for 6 months. And that consulting relationship between this consultant and this founder even though during that 6 months, it was nothing but a headache for the consultant because they knew where the end, they've already asked the question, you're saving 100,000 a year, so why don't you charge 25,000?
Right.
Ultimately, the founder did again 6 months later. And the only reason I expressed that in details, again, I don't want people to overlook that this consultant maintained a relationship for 6 months, never changed their advice really, just kept saying the same thing for 6 months, and that's not easy to do. So the founder, and it sold and scaled exponentially thereafter.
Mm-hmm.
There's many things that go into that, probably the perception of the product, the many things, but it was all, the consultant could cite many references. Again, a lot to do with the perception of when you're charging, say, $100 a month for an automation service. And saying that was equivalent to about what this service had launched for, about $100 a month type subscription. They launched on a subscription model, like $100 a month. Whereas when they changed their pricing to $25,000 per year, it actually sold more and easier. The sales cycle like dropped in a fourth and sold to more clients. And it's like, because they're basing it off what they're actually doing, which is value. But you're saving the role of the 100,000 accountant,
right?
For those particular smaller businesses.
Yeah, no, it's the psychology of buying, right? It's if I can see where I'm saving, and you're only going to cost me a fraction of that, that's a whole lot of money that I'm willing to split.
And they never phrased it that way, did it? And think about the contrast when they initially launched, and it's not wrong, but $100 a month subscription, and you don't think that there's two different things, because again, at the end of the day, nothing changed in the service per se. Sure. It was literally a pricing decision 6 months after the fact of a consulting, somehow keeping that relationship, keeping it positive, keeping them as a client, and then eventually listening. But nothing changed in the product,
right?
In the deliverable, right. Not a thing. Not a single line of code was added. And to go from, of course, when you tell that story, you would think that they would scale it to $100 a month subscription, but that's not what happened.
Well, because and I don't know, right? But my perception of that is, $100 a month. It can't be that valuable. It can't be that good, right? Like it's
that
not.
Is what the consultant mentioned a lot of the perception of the consumer, and it's very it's important. And in this case, it's Exhibit A, because as the data says, and not just this company, but many others that the consultants have cited, that yes, $100 a month has a certain level. Now that may be subjective to each individual, but there is what you think that value is.
Yeah.
Whether it's in groceries, whether it's whatever you think 100, and it was not, and that was what the consultant was initially stating, was that is not the perception or the value that you want to associate with what you're delivering.
Right.
And it's your pricing that's screwing you, because that is knowingly or unknowingly pigeonholing the consumer into think of what they get for that.
Yeah.
Now, yes, they would have got a better deal with the $100 a month subscription, but they're not going to.
Right. Right.
Because they're not signing up.
I'm daydreaming with you. I almost think if you're going to go to 100, you go to 0, right? And you come up with a bigger upside for the provider, right? We're going to give this to you, but here's what we get, right? Hey, I'll try that. $100 a month. It's like, wow, I don't know,
that's even good. That's brilliant. The no risk. Oh, wow. So that you could, hold on. We got to come back to a meeting on 2 things. We have to have a separate meeting on productization of services and how to do that for, you can pick industries. And 2, this zero risk type value pricing, and how to do that. I'm sure you could write, that's in demand pretty much of any service-based business. One, how do you product, back to the first, how do you productize? 2, how do you make it at a no risk to the consumer, whoever that consumer may be, and then do your value-based pricing, whether that may be $1,000 or $25 or $100, whatever it is.
Right.
If you could talk that, well, first off, write a book about it, and it will be a New York Times bestseller tomorrow. I've got clients, probably 90% would buy it. But that's a whole class in and of itself, I assume. It's a lot of work. It's a mindset shift, right? Because it's not only convincing the buyer to do it differently, there's a whole lot of selling inside the company that you've got to do. You've got to convince the CFO. You got to convince yes.
You've got
case that I get brought up, it was the C-suite duo that it was hard over. It was the founder, which was an engineer type, the kind of the brain behind the automation itself, and the CFO, which it came from a CFO background, and it was the automation concept was their brainchild, but neither one of those associated billing a client for 25,000. I don't know if that do with their personal side. One thing of note in this story, since they were the two biggest naysayers, and that's a strong player to have against you initially, is the founder and a CFO. Neither one of them came from a selling background. Okay. I think that actually matters into why they were resistant.
Yeah, no, that's fair, and because once
to them it was just black and white. This is what it costs. Here's 30% on top.
Yeah. But once you sell and once you start interacting with,
you understand, it's not black and white. It's not binary.
Right. No, it's it's an art, not a science, and it's understanding human psychology and what's going to entice people to make a decision.
This is the last in the controversial category, and then I have one more if you would allow me the time. And the question, and again under the controversial pretext, is what do you think is the most overrated trend in your field? So we've covered the misconception, the hour watch and sell it, but take my watch and sell it back to me. Or are there industry practices you believe? And you preach. We could have a whole nother episode just on value-based pricing. And in this question, it hits the, what do you think is an overrated trend? And again, if you could answer it in two ways, great. If it's universal, even better. Into consulting at large and consulting within the vertical you're in.
Yeah. I think, and I could be wrong on this, but I'm going to say AI. Right. I think AI is going to do great things, but I don't think it's going to be as great as everybody thinks it is right now, right? Or as they think right now. Because I think for consulting, it still comes down to that personal relationship, right? It comes down to what we've been talking about in terms of you've got to tailor the advice, the approach to the particular psychology of the person that you're dealing with. And maybe AI can do that, or maybe AI will be able to do that.
I find AI being better at your automotive type services, which is where they've been before. Like in your mechanical line of building a car, they're putting on the tire 1,000 times. Putting on the tire right here, put that tire, put that arm, mechanical robot arm. Right. But AI is not good at the creative, at all. In fact, all these people talking about, and I'm agreeing with you, I think, in that these jobs being replaced. I don't think they're replaced. They're displaced in that. Maybe you don't need a person doing a robotic function. Like you can automate something, but even to your point, you need to know what your process that you can automate. Yeah. Beyond that, you still need the human there.
Right. Well, I don't think people are ready yet to just take recommendations from AI and
and I don't even know if it's equipped to do that. I've yet to see an AI that capable. And AI is good at send an email at 8 a.m. and it'll send the email at 8. Again, the automation.
Right.
But I still have to have a relationship with the person, kind of proof the con. All the AI can really do at its heart is the automation itself.
Yeah, well,
the fulfillment.
And I've seen this in consulting, like when one of these tech trends pop up, because I've seen this within consulting, the future of consulting is AI. But there's always this
statement that I don't even know if it says anything.
There's always this overhype phase for new technologies around consulting, and there's a lot of hype. It doesn't live up to the reality. And then you find a way to use it to supplement what you do. But, I've seen things where it's going to displace the consulting industry.
No,
I don't think it's going to become another tool in the toolkit for the consultant to your point, those, robotic, repetitive tasks, leverage AI to do some of that. Go gather this data for me.
Sure.
But it's not going to be, here's your recommendations, here's your strategic plan, here's your operational plan for the next 3 years. That still takes the human to analyze, decipher, piece things together, and then make sure, this client can digest it this way, or we've got to tweak it to make sure that they buy into it.
I agree with you 100% in that AI is overhyped, especially in its current expression and interpretation in the public sphere, and that what AI is and how it operates, and this is coming from a machine learning background, it's nothing more than an evolution of a calculator. It's the if then statement. If 2 + 2, then forward. Now, what I dive down a little bit further into that analogy is the internet, like the Google search engine, as we saw the start of them. And I do think AI can is the next evolution of search engines. And I could talk about that later. And here's why. It gives you direct answers. It's not page 7 or scroll down. It will give you your answer. And that's the evolution of the search engine, is the AI can give you the direct answer, but that it doesn't tell you what that answer is or what the context. With one, we forget that it's not sentient, and that matters because it doesn't have the emotion, and that matters because think about how it's working, the machine learning behind the scenes. So if a Google can, if you type in what is widgets, well, we know that Google has 8,000,740 gazillion pages. Now, all AI is the evolution to that, in that it can read all those pages.
Yeah.
And what it's doing, no matter what question you ask it, it's saying of gazillion responses, here's the most common.
Yep.
So when you're asking it to formulate a paragraph it's taking all the context, just like a Google search engine would search. Like, again, we know that when Google we search. Now, side note, a little joke. The best place to hide a dead potty is on the second page of Google because nobody looks. I'm joking there, but the point is we know that there's multiple pages and that it's found within about a second. It used to tell you the time, like 6 million 6 million results in 0.05 seconds, Well, all AI is the evolution to that, in that it's reading all that content.
Right.
And it's giving you the path of least resistance. Now, it may seem innovative to you because that was a new answer, or you haven't discovered what's on page 800,000 and beyond. Well, it has, and it was saying of these million responses, 61% of them are similar. It's going to take that 61%. So what I'm really saying for those astute listening is AI is the opposite of innovation. It is the most common is what it will give you.
Yeah.
Now, it may be innovative in your perception and in your whatever you may ask, but what it did is it read the dictionary. And I would actually argue it depends on how far you want to take that, beat this dead horse, is AI. We don't actually have it yet in the truest sense, because think of like Siri, Alexa. These are not, and when you get into the higher level or the grad level and you're deciding what is intelligence, one of the things that would distinguish us humans is we do have language, and there's many things, but let's just talk language. Well, what Siri is you plugged in a dictionary to a voice recognition system, and you've also plugged it in to, say, the internet, and it's seen all of us talk. Well, that's mimicking. That's not intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
That's regurgitation. Like, Siri doesn't have a language. She's just a voice recognition tied into a dictionary.
Yeah.
Mapped against the language of our internet searches, so she knows our dialect, if you will. But that's not learning. It's not its own intelligence. Now, there is some cases like MIT and stuff where these things have created their own languages, which is, and I'm pointing out languages particular as an actual mark of intelligence. And we use that for any species, many marks, but it's like, what is intelligent? One of them is like your dog can learn about 20 words on average, but it's not enough to develop a full language. Not saying they can't communicate, but like language. And I'm using that particular. It's like, well, Siri didn't have language.
Yeah.
Siri is regurgitating. And keep in mind, regurgitating what? Whatever you search, there's a million answers. Well,
right.
Just assume a million. Well, she read all million, just like the internet did, just like Google did, but she's reading each page instead of just categorizing it.
Right.
And telling you that here's the most common answer. So when you're asking anything from AI, what you're actually getting is the least innovative result.
Yeah.
Now, some people that will trigger, but I'll stand on that hill because that's how machine learning works. It's not going to give you the outlier.
So does AI stand for anti-innovation, not artificial intelligence?
You can make that argument. In fact, I love that you said that, because I'm going to noodle that probably in my sleep and run off on it with my own soapbox sermon on that. But you could make that argument, yes, because of how much it's working. It takes all its inputs. Now AI is only as good as its data. But and AI is actually way better for like enterprise. It's not made really for your small businesses. It's not going to because you need large data sets. Right. But even then, it's just taking it and taking the most common path to whatever input you give it. If it's just like the calculator. If 2 + 2 then 4, whereas that's very linear. The only difference we've evolved, if there is the evolution, is now instead of telling it 2 + 2 is 4. You say, here's the rule, here's the Harvard book on mathematics. Then you ask it, and if anyone's a machine learning engineer, they can I'm preaching their pains. it's when you first start teaching AI, again, it's only as good as the data you give it. And that's a hard thing to do, is give it the right data. And then you start asking it, what's 2 + 2? Well, now AI, instead of, again, you program hard programming, if 2 + 2, then 4, it says 17. You're like, nope, try again. 16, nope, try again. 10, nope, try again. 7, no. 4, yes. 4, yes. 4, yes. Now it will start giving 4 infinitely.
Okay.
One thing you did is you didn't program the if then directly. You said, here's the rules on math. And this is where we're at in the current state of public consumed AIs. You just giving it the right data set. And well, if you're using the AI, they've already done this. Machine learning engineers, they had the trial and error of telling the AI not necessarily what to think, but how to think.
Right.
So here's the rule. Here's the Harvard book on mathematics. Now, and then you ask it a question of what's 2 + 2, and it's like, well, if any machine learning engineer is listening, they'll say hallelujah, because at first it'll say 470. You're like, wrong, and you got to get it down to where it's like, wait, 4, and then it'll start saying 4 infinitely. Well, not infinitely, but 99.99999. It'll associate that as the then to your if on its own, but it learned. That's the machine learning piece of it. But again, that learning can only be as good as the data you give it. And to most small businesses, you don't have enough data.
Right.
AI in its current form would be good for like your enterprises, but even then they're just in automations. I'm gonna sing your praises in that. I'm glad you said it, not me, and that it's overhyped, and that the functionality is way overhyped. Sure, it can help with some automation, some robotic pieces, and that's where it's good at. But don't think that it's a messiah, a technological messiah. Like it's not. It's
well,
not,
I think
or panacea.
All these new technologies, they get overhyped, right?
That's true, and that is a cycle, a scheme since going back post World War II.
It's a crash, and then it's okay. How do we leverage this, right? Like it's the .com boom, where all these companies that are no longer in existence, had huge IPOs, and then people figured out, oh, here's how we leverage.
There's no tangible value at the end.
Right.
Sure, it was not to insult those involved, but it was the lipstick on the pig. It's still just a pig. I can only get barbecue out of it. Just because you put lipstick on it doesn't mean the bacon changes.
I like it.
It's a terrible analogy, but I like it. I'm gonna stick with it. All right, moving to our next section, and I appreciate your time here, and I hope, and I know that my listeners will appreciate this, because again, it's really your broad application / your specific expertise within technology where we overlap, and I know my listeners will appreciate, and I appreciate the time you've given me so far. And this next to last section, the last section being the closing questions, but this next to last, I want to, and we've kind of teed it up perfectly, and that your last answer being AI is a little overhyped, and I'm agreeing with you, whether it's consulting or otherwise. I want to phrase everything under, say, the pretext of future oriented.
Okay.
So under that pretext, let's say, what are your long-term goals, both personally and professionally? And as always, please be as forthright as you care to be.
Yeah. I think, it's the second time I'm building a firm like this. And what I want to do is, I want to build it so that it's around in 20 or 30 years, right? I want to, bring on folks to the team. They're going to be here for the long haul, and that, can grow with me and the organization, and that we're continually out there helping these professional services groups get better, right? Because there are more PS organizations this year than there were 5, 10, 15 years ago. I truly believe there's going to be more tomorrow, right? Because there's more technology, and it's not going to stand up by itself and get the job done. Somebody's going to have to configure it. Someone's going to have to install it. Someone's going to have to integrate it in with other systems. And so, I truly want to just build this up so that that it's a big team of folks that are out there focused on that mission, and driving success.
Now, in that sense of the market becoming more players, is there also an opportunity, and you could say this is, I guess the question is oriented around your own plan to scale professionally and arguably personally, to like consolidate a lot of the arguably fragmented ones that are continuously being added to the market, the consulting firms and agencies coming to market? Is there an opportunity, say, for your own scale, to like consolidate some of that, or is that not necessarily the case per se in consulting agencies?
Well, so in terms of, I would say 80% of my business are the embedded professional services organizations inside of a software technology hardware company. So most of those companies are going to build their own. I do think there is an opportunity for that other 20% of the pure consulting systems integration firms for some degree of consolidation. And what I've even advocated for in a past life is, there should be a group of just consultants that are, the white label, private label consultants that are trained on multiple products, so that you as a software company, when you need 10 people, we're giving you 10 people. When you only need 5 people, you're sending 5 people back to the library, and we're getting them redeployed elsewhere, right? So that
a marketplace of almost consulting. Wow, that
yeah. And so
that build that today, I would get that. Good gracious, that who couldn't use that? Like consulting at scale, because you're so many verticals. There's HR and whatever HR your vertical is, like consulting lane. Like who couldn't use? Any business could use that. That's a broad statement, but I think it's true.
Well, and it's a marketplace, but it's a B2B marketplace in that it's let's just say these 5 different software companies all have 25 people on the payroll, right? That's 125 people. 125 people aren't fully billable, right? It's probably 80 people are fully billable.
You could argue that that's almost at any point at any function almost, because you can't use 100% efficiency. There's not even especially at an enterprise.
Yeah, but so create this, private label systems integrating consulting firm, right? The 100 people that you need are embedded in there, and you're loaning them out to these different groups for a month, 2 months, 6 months at a time, based on their forecasted demand. They're paying for it, right? Mm-hmm. And then if they need to tap into more, right, there's a premium that they pay for that. If they oversubscribe, well, that's the penalty. But we help them forecast, but they're not carrying the full 25 burden at all times when they don't need it, right? And
if I understand that right, I think the added value is almost instant right off the cuff, the savings, in that the biggest thing that they're not doing is W-2ing everybody.
Right. Now, the argument against it, right, because I've talked to folks about this, is, well, we're going to build up skills. These people are going to build relationships.
They want them themselves.
And then we're going to lose them, right? They're going to go to one of your other.
But I think your argument would it not be that you wouldn't be using that particular, say, machine learning engineer. You may not need that machine learning engineer your whole cycle.
Right. That's the point, right? And it's getting people comfortable with, the part-time staffing, right? Or
yes, I like that.
We're going to put somebody else in that knows it. My argument back to that is, look, when somebody leaves, you go hire somebody, you train them up, you get them going. This is no different than that, other than we're going to save you some money along the way.
In my example, if I'm understanding you right, it's like I don't need them. I honestly couldn't, as an example, I couldn't, in hypothetical company A, keep a team of machine learning engineers busy 52 weeks of the year, but I would in the first 6 months. But then what really happens, if I'm being honest, is I need to shift. It wants to say the product is perfect at the 6 month. They put out a perfect product, which won't. But I don't necessarily need 5 for the remaining 6 months of the year. What I need is product managers or product developers. I don't necessarily. So, this marketplace that I can interchange to my need at the scale that I need it. But that, I also see a problem with that. And this isn't a big problem, but a problem no less, is the educating of the consumer here, being the founder, like knowing you don't have 6 months of workload for 5 machine learning engineers. What you need is build your product. That'll take 6 months. But then we need to shift. You need to keep one that will maintain, and their job will be boringly, arguably in contrast, because they'll be just maintaining.
Yep.
And then you need to switch those 4 that you trade back. And I don't want to commoditize people, but yes, that's what salaries do. They commoditize us. You need product developers or product managers. You don't need, or whatever it may be. I'm just interpreting the term.
You different semesters, you need different books, right? And to the library, I'm going to check out the books I need. I'm going to bring back the ones that I finished, right? And
that's a good analogy, in that you don't stay in the same class forever.
Right. And hey, my technology stack's changing. I don't have to retool my entire workforce. I put the books back and I go check out the other books.
Like I may stay in mathematics, but I went from algebra to calculus. It's like it's still, I need to pivot. I got to get out of algebra. Well, you could argue that calculus, that's a terrible example, because calculus is just trigonometry, which is advanced algebra. It's like That's a terrible, but you see, it's still the job is to get out of that class.
Right. Exactly.
Beautiful. Let me get back to my question here. Got me all excited here at the end. If you could start your career over, would you do anything differently? That's loaded.
Yeah. Hindsight's always 20/20, right? And I know I have made mistakes through the career, but it's been a great ride, right? And I've as I've sort of think I've said, I've learned as much, if not more, from the mistakes than from the successes, right? With success, it's easy to think you know what you're doing. When you make a mistake, you know what you did wrong, right? Like that's an objective fact. And so, like, I've enjoyed it, right? I've had different, varied experiences. I've been, part of the thin end of the wedge into new clients that blossomed over time. I have led a large organization. I've returned from being the managing partner to being more the client partner, or even the individual, consultant to a client. So, it'd be easy to say, oh, I would do this different or I do that different. But in hindsight, that's easy. In the moment, you did something, you may have made a mistake, but you learn from it.
Humanity has gotten to where we at by an oversimplification of humanity is our greatest value or gift or skill is actually to make mistakes, because arguably in contrast to AI, what AI cannot do is if you ask it 2 + 2, it cannot say 5, whereas a human can and even know that the answer is 4. And if you look at humanity at large, we've gotten here by we messed up, we assessed, we messed up better. But it's that ability to say 5. When asked 2 + 2 is 4, it's that ability to make the mistake is especially in direct contrast to AI itself. It's like no AI is going to tell you if 2 + 2 then 4.
Exactly.
Whereas we can say 5 and even give you a strong argument why, and that hey, it was 4, but then it was time and interest and like we could even. That's our skill, is the mistake. And I guess what we're both saying in 2 different ways is that don't be scared to make those, because that mistake might be the answer.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think most people, I know I do. I learn more from my mistakes than successes, right? Like
that's Exhibit A to our point.
So
this is a large existential question, but I'm gonna ask it nonetheless. Okay. What legacy do you hope to leave behind in your industry?
That's a great question. It's really around this resource management process that I've talked a little bit about.
Where you've helped build the forecasting.
Yeah, because I built it 20 years ago, right? And I've helped a good number of clients adopt it. But I walk in and I see other firms, right? They're still stuck in, there's 2 phases. There's staffing and forecasting. Staffing is what I call the -5 to +15 day window. What do we need to do right now? We've got this need. We've got to put a body in there. Forecasting is looking 1, 3, 6 months out, however long your pipeline will allow you to. 90% of organizations are stuck in that staffing window, right? And so they will hire because, well, we might have more demand in the future, so let's go open some recs, right? If you can forecast, right, it gets back to this concept we were just talking about, starting this white label firm. If we can help 5, 10, 20 companies forecast their actual demand, we can take 2,000 people down to 1,800 people, save a bunch of money, right? Be much more efficient and effective in getting the right person in the right place at the right time, as opposed to just, well, we've got a body, so let's throw them in there. Let's get the right skilled person in there. And so what I really want my legacy to be is about transforming the industry to really drive that vision.
That's really a transformation of resource management, really you're speaking to it, the resonance of the position. See, let's make sure we get the right depth, breadth, not just bodies.
Yeah. Not just, well, we've got this person, they're on the bench, so let's throw them in. It's no, let's get the skilled person there, because what I have found when you adopt this resource management process, a good chunk of your project execution problems go away, right? Because it's not, I need everyone to be PMP certified And that'll make success. Success is when you have that architect, the developer, the technician, the consultant that knows what they're talking about there. That's when you don't get the problems, right? That's what makes things run a lot smoother.
Mark, I do appreciate your time, and we've reached and especially the amount you've extended to me and our listeners. Now that we've reached the last section, I'd like to preface as the closing questions to wrap everything up that we've talked today. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received, and who gave it to you?
Yeah, and I hit on this one, I think, earlier. It's my dad asking me, what do you think? Right. And the reason that's the best piece of advice, it's because it's forced me to not look externally for validation. It's enabled me to look like, hey, do I think I did a good job? Right. And this client may not appreciate what I did, or this boss may not like what I did, but I am comfortable with, I gave it my all. I did the best I could. I think this is the right answer. If they don't like it, I'm disappointed in that, but it's not going to knock me for a loop and really mess with my psyche.
Your dad's advice, Gary's advice resonates, and there's a particular scene. Are you familiar with Harry Potter?
Not a little bit, but not a ton.
There's a scene at the end, Dumbledore, which is the teacher, the leader of the school that Harry Potter attended. He is dead. He'd been killed and murdered by, and we find out later who. But he's talking to Harry Potter in this dream-like scene. So he's talking to him in this scene, and Harry asked him, "Am I dreaming?" And Dumbledore. It goes to her, is this, because Harry's really the context of the question, is this not real? Like this conversation we're having and this advice that you're shedding in this moment. And the wise sage that Dumbledore's character replies back, well, of course it's a dream, but what doesn't that make it real? Or how does that not make it real? And it's alluding to exactly your dad's advice. It's the internal validation. It's the what's in between your ears.
Right.
Good, bad, or in between. It does, but it's whatever you think. And that doesn't mean right or wrong. But it does mean it needs to be self-derived. Right. Your own validation. I don't mean don't take inputs, and that's not what your dad, I don't think, was suggesting.
No.
Expressed it. But you do need to have the own fortitude to derive it between your own ears.
Yeah, exactly.
Not always seek that external person to say, yes, you're happy or you're not happy. No, you should know that happiness is internal or whatever the verb may be.
Yeah. Look, you're not going to, no matter how good you are, you're never going to please 100% of the people. And, you've got to know, look, I gave it my all, and I think I told them the right thing to do. They may not act on it, but hey, that's their decision, right? That's what consulting is. It's you're not a dictator, you're a consultant, and you do the best job that you can. They may take the advice, they may not, but
you're the one that's leading the horse to the water.
Right. Exactly.
Now, drinks or not, we all know how that proverb goes, but
exactly,
you can just lead it to the water. What's next for you, Mark? Any upcoming projects or goals you're excited about?
Yeah, I think it's just continuing to push forward, right? I mean, the resource management thing was a sort of foundation for my real success in professional services. I think now it's transitioning into this services as a product phase where helping organizations create the Lego blocks, right? Here's how I snap these Lego blocks together so I can sell it faster. And then that's really the front door to this resource management process that we're talking about, right? Because if it's defined, I know how many people I need. I know the skills I need. I know the duration I need them for. I can feed that into my process. And I've got much better data and analytics to say, oh, I need to go get 10 new people. I need to cross-train these 5 people. And it just makes the professional services organization more efficient, but it also makes it much easier to work with sales and finance and the rest of the organization, where typically there's there can be a lot of acrimony between sales and services and finance and services. This just smooths all that out and helps everyone work together.
It's another benefit that you've described that I see a problem a lot have is the silos of these various departments, and that where this resource management almost like a secondary value is it creates kind of the information stream. I'm not necessarily it keeps the left hand informed with the right hand, but more so than say accounting has no idea or sales and finance has no idea what the marketing is doing, has no idea what sales is doing, has no idea what development is. Like your resource management, in a sense, it's almost a secondary value.
Part of the process is this governance phase or stage where, once a month you're checkpointing with sales and finance with the data and analytics to say, here's the demand sales is driving, here's the supply that I have, here's the mismatch, right? Too many, too few, the wrong skills. So finance, here's what we need to do, right? We need to cross-train, which is going to cost money. We need to go higher because we've got the demand, right? But then everyone sits and makes an informed decision. Well, that deal's not real, so cross that off the list. So your gap of 20 goes to 15 or 10.
Again, it's breaking down those silos, whereas before that's even a challenge in real life. The problem is even getting these two hands to talk to each other, departments to talk to each other.
Right. And then services can be more proactive with sales to say, push this type of service offering, push these products because we have this capacity of resources. Finance likes that, right? You then bring HR and the training departments into the mix because they're stakeholders. So this, one of the things I've seen is professional services is historically reactive to the rest of the organization. This flips the script. It makes professional services proactive to the rest of the organization, which only helps the rest of the organization know how they should perform and operate and act.
So professional services are primary, obviously the resource management, and as you've described in detail, and then the secondary being the breaking down the silos and the information, and almost even a tertiary is the revenue operations from a holistic point of view. You don't have to preface it as revenue, but you're looking at the whole picture, right? Because of the secondary benefit. It is a way better flow or process, if you will.
Yes. No, absolutely. I appreciate you're absorbing it quickly and getting it, but it smooths things throughout the entire organization for all the stakeholders.
Well, now you've whet my appetite. So assuming that I'm not the single outlier, which has never once happened, how can our listeners connect with you and stay updated on your work?
Yeah, a few different ways. So website is Asaph Advisors, which is ASAPHADVISORS.com. We've got a blog there. You can follow us on LinkedIn. My email is mark@asaphadvisors.com, and would welcome the opportunity to talk to anybody.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll wrap up here and sharing your incredible journey and insights. Your experience and the wisdom you've gained along the way have provided so much value to myself and our listeners. For those who want to learn more about Mark and the amazing work he's doing at Asaph Advisors, you can reach out to him directly at mark@asaphadvisors or visit their web.com or visit their website, www.asaphadvisors.com. Whether you're looking to take your tech business to the next level or need expert guidance in business planning and operations optimization, Mark and his team are definitely the people to talk to. If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to Full-Time Hustler on your favorite podcast platform. We've got a lot more inspiring interviews and valuable content coming your way, so make sure you don't miss out. And remember, every successful journey starts with a single step. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a leader, or just someone looking to make a change, keep pushing forward, stay curious, and never stop hustling. Until next time, keep striving for your full potential. And thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Full-Time Hustler. And Mark, it's been a pleasure.
No, thank you, Jason. I appreciate it.